Been beaten before. Not like that. Encore!
Madame Lavoisier, in England the birch is used for chastisement.
We have a young nobleman in the south of our country, the Marquis de Sade.
Ladies, the secret of the sauna is in moderation. In Sweden, we use the birch to bring blood to the surface. So much better than the leeches.
Oh! The immodesty of the sauna disquiets me.
Mrs. Priestley, you are among women. Now, were there men here?
You are young, madame.
19.
I was 20 before I married.
So was I. How many children do you have?
A young son, and you?
3 sons and a daughter. And you, madame?
None.
I presume you married only recently.
6 years ago.
That is young.
And no children?
None.
After 6 years? My Sarah was born when we'd been married but 10 months.
Shakana Sangu.
So, you think it was a matter of taste? I took it as an obligation when I married, but then, of course, I was not a child.
Perhaps women in France mature faster, especially those brought up in convent schools.
A convent?
Oh, not to become a nun. In France, all women of our class are sent to convent schools. I was 12 and even studied chemistry. Butter of arsenic, sugar of lead, flowers of zinc. How charming, I thought. First, chemistry in the kitchen, then chemistry in the garden.
A child of 12 would find it charming.
But at 13, my mother died, and I left the convent to serve as my father's hostess. I escaped the attentions of a count much older than my father by marrying Monsieur Lavoisier. He is active in the tax collection agency and also heads the discount bank.
A tax collector? A banker?
And a lawyer at 21.
Yet your husband was invited to Sweden because of his chemical discoveries?
So was Madame Priestley's husband. He is a priest, is he not?
No priests, if you please. A minister. We are Unitarians, madame. When you marry a man of God, you know you will find riches greater than money. But our beliefs are opposed by the Church of England. We cannot hold government office. Our sons cannot go to Oxford or Cambridge.
When I spoke about the chemistry I learned in the convent, my husband told me something very useful.
I beg your pardon?
The product of science is knowledge, but the product of scientists is reputation. Reputation is important to him, and when I married him, it also became important to me. Especially when he asked me to assist him in his work.
He asked you that? At age 13?
Bien sûr.
Seems so very young.
There was chemistry to study. Art, too. I took lessons with Jacques-Louis David. I also learned Latin and English, all to help my husband. Each day in the laboratory, I make a list of what experiments are to be done. Antoine calls out the numbers, I write them down. I draw the plates for his books, I etch them.
Oh, is that why you have no children?
Mrs. Priestley, I translated Dr. Priestley's experiments on different kinds of air.
You did?
And his writings on phlogiston.
The principle of fire, an explanation for all chemistry.
His explanation.
What do you mean?
We are not convinced.
We?
My husband is not convinced. Therefore, I am not convinced.
Herr Scheele is convinced. He says so in his book.
What book?
On the chemistry of air and fire, the only book he's written.
My husband never mentioned
It
it.
will be published soon, perhaps while you are still in Stockholm.
So this is your husband's newest work.
Apothecary Scheele is not my husband. Herr Poole was an apothecary and the father of my son, but he's dead.
And Mr. Scheele, a relative?
He took over my husband's pharmacy in Sherping, a small town some 30 leagues west of Stockholm. I keep house for him.
So you assist Monsieur Scheele.
Not in the laboratory.
Yet you know of his new book.
When Carl Wilhelm, Apothecary Scheele, first arrived in our little town some 3 years ago, he related his work on airs to my father and me. He was so excited about it.
And when was that work done?
Some years earlier, I'm sure. The book tells it all.
Are its contents known to anyone?
But of course, to your husband. Did Herr Scheele not send 3 years ago a letter to Paris describing his experiments with fire air?
I know of no correspondence between them.
He did wonder why your husband never thanked him.
He had nothing to thank him for.
Ladies, perhaps we should cool off.
You're right. Tomorrow, His Majesty will decide who was first.
That is not why we came.
So, what did bring you here?
To show the world what Monsieur Lavoisier has discovered.
But it was Dr. Priestley who first made that discovery.
I'm afraid we shall have to disagree, my dear Madame Priestley.
Come. You have sweated enough. Mrs. Priestley's birch is waiting.
Children, what gives Fru Poole the right to ask, not even married to Apothecary Scheele? I helped Antoine in the laboratory as in the salon, but when he reasoned out how we breathe, how sulfur burns, how to make better gunpowder, he spoke to men, to Monsieur Mange, to Monsieur Laplace, to Monsieur Turgot, but not to me. Yet I helped Antoine in ways he doesn't know about and never will. I must be careful with Madame Priestley. And now I see also with Madame Poole. We did not come to Stockholm to make mistakes. So, we shall talk women's talk. About our husbands, of course, how good they are, how we help them. Wearing the woman's mask, the husband's face on it, smiling politely. But will the men go on smiling when their discoveries are disputed? Will we? Madame Poole knows of the letter. I am afraid.
A retro Nobel for work done before 1901. What a way of celebrating the centenary of the Nobel Prizes.
At least the losers won't be able to hold it against us.
Well, it's different, I suppose, recognizing dead people.
Still too much work.
You always complain about time spent on Nobel Committee business. Most Swedes would be proud to pay the prize.
You pay, I'm tired of paying it. My work suffers.
So resign.
Not a chance. I like the power. And the gossip. But choosing a dead winner, they don't even repay favors.
You don't mean that?
I'm just being honest.
Well, honesty has its place, but this isn't it.
Oh, I'm surprised to hear that from you, of all people.
You would say that?
With Astrid as chairman of the Nobel Committee, this could be interesting.
She prefers to be called chairperson.
Never had a woman before.
She deserves it. A damn good theoretician.
In my experience, theoreticians make lousy chairmen.
When it comes to Astrid, I wouldn't generalize. Besides, she always gets her way.
Which you know from personal experience, of course.
Ha ha ha, that was a lifetime ago. At least more years than I care to remember. Now here she comes now with her shadow, the mysterious Ulla Zorn.
Astrid, have you told them about me?
Not yet, Ulla.
They must be wondering.
I'm sure they are. Nobel Committee secretaries are usually older.
And aren't they expecting a chemist for secretary?
That's why you're called an amanuensis.
Why not tell them what I do? It's no secret.
All in good time. Trust me. Good morning, gentlemen. You're early.
No, we're punctual, like all good Swedes.
You haven't changed, Bengt.
No, just a little, surely.
You've all met Ulla Zorn? Shall we get to work? We're here to decide on the first retro Nobel for work done before 1901. I assume you have all the relevant papers?
A procedural question. Why are there only 4 of us? We've never had fewer than 5 members. You have no deadlocks with an odd-numbered committee.
Trust Suna, always complaining.
It's my decision. Any other questions?
So our choices are restricted to the 19th century or earlier.
At least we have fewer Americans. In fact, only one, Willard Gibbs. What's chemistry without thermodynamics?
Not an American again, please. The choice is obvious. Dmitri Ivanovich Mendeleev. Can you imagine chemistry without the periodic table? It's our Rosetta Stone.
What about Louis Pasteur? The prizes should be distributed to those who have conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. That's what it says in Alfred Nobel's will. If you stop people on the street with the question, who has conferred the greatest benefit on mankind? Gibbs, Mendeleev, or Pasteur, they'll say Gibbs. Never heard of him. Mendeleev, spell it. Everyone knows Pasteur.
But we aren't people on the street. Wait a minute. Is this part of the formal meeting?
We aren't just the usual Nobel Committee preparing our recommendation to the Academy on who should win the prize. This time, we're also generating the shortlist. We need a record to show it was all above board.
Still amazed we were asked to do both.
You're here.
Back to business. We have Gibbs, Mendeleev, Pasteur. What other names would you like to throw into the pot?
Why not a Swede for the first one? When it came to the regular Nobel Prizes, the Academy waited until 1903 before giving it to Iranian.
He can't just be Swedish, he also has to deserve it.
All right, if you want a Swede, what about Carl Wilhelm Scheele for the discovery of oxygen?
Start with the 18th century. Why not earlier?
He probably wants to give it to an alchemist, maybe even Paracelsus.
The 18th century might not be a bad idea. People publish less, so we had less to read.
But if we select Scheele, what about Antoine Lavoisier?
Or Joseph Priestley.
Right back to the usual Nobel quandary, too many candidates.
What about John Dalton, the father of the atomic theory?
Nonsense. Oxygen had to be discovered first, maybe for the second or third retro Nobel.
Ulf has a point. Oxygen started the chemical revolution. From it came a science, quantitative measurements, the real elements in
Absolutely.
place.
Everybody else, Dalton, Gibbs, Mendeleev, and all the Nobel Prizes in chemistry since 1901 followed from that.
Amazing to think that before the chemical revolution, people were convinced that when things burned, something was released. It's called phlogiston. You want me to spell that?
Phlogiston.
Very good.
Just a minute, Bengt. These days, even many chemists won't have the slightest idea what phlogiston means. You'll have to explain it. Clear and pithy, please.
Phlogiston, the essence of fire. How's that?
Too pithy.
Well, you're not easy to please. Today.
But why even bother with a discarded theory?
It's not as stupid as it sounds. It makes sense in its own way that when anything burns, something, phlogiston leaves, poof, goes out into the air.
Nice theory, but they were dead wrong. To move forward, scientists had to look at it exactly the other way around to arrive at the simple but blinding understanding that during the process, something is taken from the air.
And that something is oxygen, and realizing that it's part of the air and not all of it may seem obvious today, but then in a time of revolutions, it was a revolutionary insight.
Yes, but we have to be careful because both Priestley and our Swedish hero, Scheele, believed in phlogiston until they died.
So they fell for the chemical grand unified theory of the time. But Lavoisier had the sense to pour scorn on phlogiston.
Typically French. Pouring scorn is their national sport.
Yes, but this time scorn was justified. Consider what its proponents claimed about phlogiston, that sometimes it had weight, At other times it was weightless, or that the stuff could be caustic or not, transparent or opaque, colored or colorless. In other words, that it could account for anything.
And your point is?
That the language of chemistry was a holy mess and the grammar all wrong, till Lavoisier got it right.
We need to be sure about our facts.
We may have to turn to historians. I'm joking.
Is there anything wrong with history?
A thing scientists do when they can't do science anymore.
What would historians know about science? We might as well search the web.
I wonder whether Scheele, Lavoisier, and Priestley ever met in one place.
Very unlikely.
Makes you say that?
Absence of any historical evidence.
Oh, and how would you
Think
know
of the royal competitions held all over Europe at the time. Scientists of the time needed patronage just as much as we need research grants today. What if they met here in Stockholm? Gustav III was wild about science and the arts.
Dream on, and how would they have talked to each other, speaking different languages?
Who worries about languages and dreams?
Herr Professor Dr. Sigmund Freud.
Maybe that's why he never got a Nobel Prize.
Tuna's always worried about missing out on prizes.
And you were never even close to one.
Look, you two, it's time to bury the hatchet. Were they as ambitious as their modern successors? I wonder who could have told us.
The obvious witnesses, other scientists of their time.
Or their wives.
I beg your pardon?
Or their wives. Most men of that time had wives. What would they have to say?
Antoine, beware.
Of what?
A challenge.
An experiment?
A book.
From Priestley?
No, Scheele.
Scheele?
Indeed.
Oh, he's a good chemist.
And careful.
I trust him.
It's so beautiful here.
The Lord has blessed us.
But, Joseph, take heed.
Of what?
An experiment.
Mine works.
It may have been done.
By who?
Scheele.
What can he have?
Something from the past.
He needs something new.
He questions.
I trust him.
I told her.
And
She denied it.
he withheld it from her.
I doubt it.
Why?
She keeps his correspondence.
I didn't know that.
But she was most curious.
And
She will tell her husband.
I do not trust him. Monsieur Lavoisier? How gracious of you to travel so far. I've never left Sweden.
The invitation came from His Majesty, and His Majesty's curiosity on matters scientific is known to all of us.
Indeed it is. I hear a but.
But does it encompass pneumatic chemistry?
Perhaps.
And includes a personal desire to have us verify in public, as the invitation states, each savant's claims to fire air.
Perhaps it does.
Well, one does not refuse a king, but...
But, monsieur?
Who is behind this? Who has the king's ear?
Torbern Bergman, primus inter pares among all Swedish scientists, as well as
Your strongest patron.
Patronage is surely not a fault.
Oh, we all have our patrons, and daily pray to God for their long life and continued support.
Amen to that. What is your question, then?
Bergman classified all chemical matter into inorganic and organic.
Only one of his many strokes of genius.
Yes, yes. Professor Bergman has never concerned himself with heirs. Why then has he arranged our meeting? To raise the Swedish flag above all others?
Because he wants to know whom God first favored among us three.
While you do not.
I already know. But
Monsieur.
But do you, or Dr. Priestley,
Dr. Priestley, we meet again. The royal invitation, I see, demands from each of us an actual experiment.
Yes?
which His Majesty suggests another will execute,
I wondered why.
to confirm each person's claim.
Claim. Can what is fact be claimed?
Once reproduced by another, claims become fact.
So they do, but does the king doubt my experiments, or do you?
Oh, no, my dear doctor. But the world needs proof.
Proof it shall have. Until tomorrow, then.
En moment, Madame Lavoisier and I, desiring to divert you and your ladies, and of course His Majesty, have devised an entertainment for your pleasure, and perhaps enlightenment. A play that we have written and have performed but once. Would you permit us to present this evening a mask on Phlogiston and his enemy?
What strange ways of presenting scientific arguments you have in France.
But the King of Sweden loves masks.
And other pleasures, we have heard.
First, to the discovery. No one will question that oxygen confers great benefit on mankind, right?
Oxygen was good for people before it was discovered.
But we've got to make it clear to the public that there are plenty of practical reasons why we need pure oxygen.
We didn't pick oxygen for its value to mountain climbers or astronauts or sick people.
There you go. Anything useful, and the professor says, who cares?
Please, you two, we have to move on. We're agreed on oxygen, right? I now propose that each of you take the primary responsibility for digging up the evidence for the claims of one of the candidates, who is fluent in French.
Il n'y a pas de doute que c'est moi. I didn't spend 2 years as a postdoc at the Pasteur Institute speaking Swedish.
Try me in Greek, Latin, or German.
And you all?
Comme ci, comme ça. Usual high school French.
That's obvious.
The Lavoisier archives are mostly in France and, of course, written in French. Lavoisier is your man banked. You know, Scheele wrote mostly in German and some peculiar Latin. I suggest you take Scheele, which leaves you with Priestley, okay?
Are you offering me a choice?
I'm offering you a candidate. But if you're unhappy, you and Sune can collaborate on both men.
Thanks, but no thanks. I'll take Priestley.
Is that it for today?
No, there is one issue that requires digging into the archives.
And what's that?
Scheele's letter to Lavoisier, in which he outlines his own experiments with oxygen, what he calls Feuerluft. We need to establish whether Lavoisier got that letter, and if so, when.
Back to the Nobel syndrome. Who did what first?
Did the one who did it first really know what he'd done?
Why does it matter?
I'm a theoretician. For me, it's necessary to understand what one finds. Maybe for you, it matters less. You're an experimentalist. You actually get your hands dirty.
Well, now it's my students' hands.
So it's dirt we're looking for.
I just wonder which kind we'll find. Dirt from honest labor or the other sort.
And where do we look?
The wives. That's where I would look. Aren't the wives usually expected to clean up the dirt?
Ulf. What was Ostrid talking about? Bury the hatchet.
You don't know. Of course, Suna will deny it.
Deny what?
You remember that Stanford group's paper on new catalysts for oxygenated polymers?
Yeah, something about it. You had some similar catalysts up your sleeve, right?
Identical, except that the American paper came out several months earlier, and they won the Gibbs Medal for that work, thanks to our distinguished colleague, Professor Calstenius. I bet that's why he proposed Willard Gibbs for the Retro Nobel, just to rub it in.
I don't get it.
When I wrote up our work and sent it to the journal, Suna got it for review, and then he sat on it for 2 months before refereeing it.
Par for the course.
And then he decided I couldn't just publish the synthesis.
What do you mean?
He said, that's not science, just taking one thing after the other off the shelf. When no one had made that one before, he said I had to figure out how that catalyst worked. Not only that it worked, I wasted another half a year on that wild goose chase. Meanwhile, he tells his Stanford pals in California all about it, and they scooped us.
Are you sure?
Who else could have told him? Who else could have told him? He knows them all too well.
Why couldn't they have found it by themselves?
No.
Simultaneous discovery. It happens
Nonsense! He told them.
Ulf, you're obsessed. Let it go.
You know as well as I that Most of the time, we're in a business where being first counts for everything. If you're second, you might as well be last.
Is that all there is to it?
How about the money they must have made off the patent?
I wouldn't blame Suna. He's too honest. You just have to look at his face.
We all wear masks.
I can't just sit here. You have got to tell them.
I like to see them off balance, Ula. It doesn't hurt, and it's amusing.
If you say so. May I ask you a question?
Certainly.
What do you get out of all this?
Wouldn't you like being both judge and jury?
And why are scientists so obsessed with prizes?
It's our occupational disease. We don't get paid much for what we do, but we are expected to behave like gentlemen.
That's not what I heard.
I mean in print. So, all we have is...
The satisfaction of being first?
Yes, and this committee is handing out the biggest pat on the back in science.
Without wanting it yourself?
No Swedish woman has ever won it, in any science. One will eventually.
How important is that to you, being first?
You're beginning to sound like a shrink.
Sorry. I just wanted to know what price you're willing to pay to be successful as a female scientist.
I decided not to have any children. Some may consider that a sacrifice, but for me it was a rational decision.
Like for Madame Lavoisier. Is the committee your baby?
That contentious committee? The best argument for contraception I've ever heard. Surely you've sensed some of the cross-currents.
You could say that.
You can see how subtle Ulf and Suna are.
Like you and Baint?
Now, what do you think of her?
Vostrid?
No, Ulla Zorn.
As a woman, deep water and not still. But as an amanuensis,
What a precious job description.
Astrid is showing off. It's just a fancier word for secretary.
She's hardly said anything except for mentioning the wives.
That's why I'm suspicious.
Zorn?
Of Astrid, springing Zord on us as part of her private agenda, I can smell it.
Keep talking about Astrid. What about the retro Nobel?
Too early to tell. And you?
Remembering the history of our discipline is refreshing.
I think you're getting old.
What's age got to do with it?
In science, only the old live in the past.
And you?
I'm interested in my future, which is why I'm now heading for the lab.
I am the vital fire of chemistry.
Mr. Lavoisier! What luck to meet you!
Madame will excuse me, but I must prepare for tonight's mock.
Surely you have time for one simple question.
A lady's questions are rarely simple.
A short question, then.
Even worse, short questions are never simple.
Monsieur, I'm not clever with words.
But you are disarmingly persistent. Your question, then, your one question.
Yesterday, in the sauna.
Yes, a curious Nordic custom, but one my wife found braced.
It was my idea to invite the ladies.
Nudity can be disarming.
Madame Lavoisier was not disarmed.
Of course, to disarm, one first needs to be armed.
Your wife was. Isn't discretion a sort of armor?
Madame Poole, you are observant.
Women from the countryside have to be.
Your question, then, your short, simple question.
Why?
Oh, your question is indeed short, but is it simple? Why what?
Why did you accept our king's invitation?
Surely that must have been obvious to you.
It was, but it isn't anymore.
Madame Poole. Au revoir.
Madame?
Ah, Monsieur Scheele. I'm looking for my husband. Tonight's mosque still requires some work.
I haven't seen him. I'm sorry. But Madame,
Yes?
I understand you keep your husband's correspondence.
How did you come to know that?
Fru Poole told me.
Oh, she tells you everything.
She's an honest woman. She shares the good and the bad with me.
Like a wife.
Or a friend. One question then.
Yes?
The letter I dispatched
Oh,
3
there
years
goes
ago
Antoine.
to...
I must catch him.
Madame, much has happened since we last met.
3 years is a long time.
Only the young would think so.
Ah, and you, monsieur? You have the wisdom that comes with age?
I would call it judgment.
Did your wife tell you about our meeting?
Even down to the beating with twigs. It seemed to enliven her. She hides nothing from me.
That I would call poor judgment.
Why?
Some things ought to be hidden, even in a sauna.
An opinion or a judgment.
Solely a comment. But no matter. You seem vexed, monsieur. I trust I'm not the cause.
3 years ago,
You dined at our table, content and eager.
you translated.
I tried my best, and you seemed grateful.
I was then.
But not now.
I'm not sure you transmitted everything.
Perhaps my knowledge of English is wanting.
Madame's English is excellent.
A judgment or a compliment?
You failed to convey your husband's enthusiasm.
Of course, a translator is also a filter, a sieve.
Whose efficacy depends on the mesh.
Indeed it does. And mine is fine.
I am speaking of filtering information, not impurities.
But so am I, monsieur. So am I.
So, Scheele on his deathbed marries the widow of the pharmacist who preceded him. Touching, Suna, but how relevant is it?
The Retro Nobel will be given for their work, not their private lives.
But what if you can't separate the two?
Lavoisier certainly had a private life, even got his head chopped off. That had nothing to do with his chemistry. He was a tax collector, hardly a popular occupation during the French Revolution. So did your man Scheele and Fru Poole ever live together?
A deep question.
It depends on one's definition of living together. For most of the time, they occupied the same house, which she kept for Scheele, but did they occupy the same bedroom? It's been said of Scheele that he never touched a body without making a discovery.
What a man.
But these bodies were chemicals, not women. In my opinion, Scheele was celibate all his life, a chemical monk.
How clever.
Miss Zorn, you sound as if you have an opinion on this topic. After all, you're the one who mentioned wives.
Yes.
Yes, you have special knowledge, or yes, they did do it.
Yes to the former and perhaps to the latter.
Carl Wilhelm! Carl Wilhelm, it's time to come in from the shed. Stop work for the night.
Soon, I'm at a critical stage.
So very cold out there. If only you could afford a proper laboratory.
I'm almost finished.
There's warm food on the stove for you. And I've nearly finished grinding the coffee.
Took time to dissolve the ore Bergman sent me. There may be a new metal in
There's
it.
a letter from the printer in Uppsala.
No book.
He promises it.
But when? I finished it last year. He sat on it for months. I complained. Now 3 more months have passed, and my experiments on fire air gather dust in that damn printer's shop.
Others know of your work.
A few friends in Sweden. The book will go far beyond our borders.
I would help you, Carl Wilhelm. If only I were not so ignorant.
You help in many ways. But before I eat, I must write that letter.
To whom?
Monsieur Lavoisier, the French chemist. He has burning lenses, Sora, that are as big as our house. With them, he can make chemical reactions go like no one else. In my letter, I will ask him to repeat my experiments on fire air.
Why ask him?
Because my air is new. Because if he repeats my work, everyone will know of it. And of me.
Forgive me, Carl Wilhelm, but is that what you desire most? That the world knows of you?
No one has asked me that before. Respect is important,
You have
Sora.
it when citizens are chirping.
And I want to earn enough money to support you and your son.
We manage.
Because you're frugal.
I've never complained.
I also want to earn enough money to buy a more powerful burning lens. So my
And to heat
experiments...
your laboratory. Carl Wilhelm, I worry about your health.
Look, the coffee's sticking to your hands. Is that a form of magnetism?
You see, he did touch part of her body and made a discovery. That could be personal magnetism.
Where did you dig that up?
Scheele mentioned the incident in a letter to Johann Carl Wilke, the secretary of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences.
But how did you come across that letter? Most chemistry students barely know who Scheele was.
A reflection on the professors rather than the students.
So, how did you discover these nuggets of information?
Later.
No, Astrid, now.
I'm finishing my PhD in history
Well,
at Lund University.
And how did you find the reference to the coffee and the girlfriend
Her
or whatever
name was
she
Sarah
was?
Margareta Poole, and I found the story the same way you would have, research.
I see. Well, in that case, let me tell you about my research. Everyone knows Lavoisier, the chemist, but he was also a banker and economist who did everything from debunking mesmerism to shipping gunpowder to the Americans. Now listen to some goodies about Madame Lavoisier.
My, I never thought my comments on wives would have such an effect on this committee.
Don't flatter yourself, Ms. Zorn. I always throw a wide net into my research.
Especially when it comes to women. Sorry. Go ahead, Banked. Tell us what you caught in your net.
First of all, Madame Lavoisier wasn't just his wife. She was also his amanuensis. Of course, not full-time.
It's not a very attractive full-time position for an ambitious woman.
Everything is possible for an ambitious woman.
She even helped in the lab, yet she was barely in her teens when she married Lavoisier, her first husband.
first husband. How many men were there?
Her second husband, Count Rumford? I think she would have liked to have forgotten him. Even though he was almost as famous as Lavoisier, but men probably a fair number even by present-day standards. Benjamin Franklin was quite smitten with her, but Pierre Samuel DuPont,
The American DuPont, the millionaire chemist?
No. His French father, now that was a different story, a love story. DuPont wrote her a letter 4 years after Lavoisier's death after, and I quote from the letter, 22 years of acquaintance and 17 of intimacy. In other words, they had been intimate for at least 13 years while the Lavoisiers were still married.
A modern couple.
A modern couple. If you could have continued to love me, I would have patiently accepted that destiny. That's DuPont speaking, not me. Because a single evening with you around the fire would have been compensation for both my eyes and heart. I belong to you, my dear young lady. That young lady was then 41.
Yes. To Ithaca, New York. Cheapest economy. 3 days only, maximum 4. I can't talk now. Sorry, I didn't know it was on.
That telephone call. I won't touch those damn things.
Another sign you're getting old. I wonder why she's flying to Ithaca.
Probably a boyfriend at Cornell University.
I doubt it.
You aren't angry, are you?
Just amused that you're showing off too much.
Bengt Yamerson irritates.
Baint is a complicated man.
I suppose that's a compliment.
In this instance, it's just an experimental observation. Think of the incentive a theoretician requires before doing an experiment.
So you also got your hands dirty.
Oh, what did you dig up on Priestley? Did you spend your time on Mrs. Priestley?
I did not. Priestley lived at the right time in the right country, England, 18th century hothouse of pneumatic chemistry. Now, in the case of Priestley, the self-taught chemist just happened to be a minister. He wrote 50 works on theology, 13 on education, 18 on political, social, and metaphysical subjects.
A preacher dabbling in chemistry.
And 50 papers and no less than 12 books on science. You wouldn't call that dabbling, would you?
Yes, but what's in those books and papers? We must deal with content, with quality, not with authorial diarrhea.
Now, just because Scheele completed only one book, just because your man was constipated...
Enough! What about the chemistry?
Did Priestley realize what he was doing?
He subjected air to all kinds of chemical
In
processes.
an utterly haphazard manner.
He was learning as he went along. When Lavoisier made his vital air, he used Priestley's method, didn't he? It's the results that count. And, in contrast to Scheele, Priestley was ambitious enough to let people know what he found.
Maybe that ambition clouded his judgment.
What's wrong with ambition? Look at it as the blemish on a Persian carpet that makes it valuable.
Oh, so does that mean a carpet without blemishes cannot be as valuable or even more so?
I'm beginning to regret having ever mentioned ambition. Or carpets. Let's forget about both. Anyway, Priestley loved to talk of his work. Probably even to his wife. Or does that surprise you, Miss Saul?
Why should it? Mrs. Priestley was educated. She wrote beautiful letters.
And what did you do in Paris?
I visited Versailles with Lord Shelburne.
And dined well, no doubt.
So I did, including one night at the table of Monsieur and Madame Lavoisier. Most of the natural philosophers of the city were there. I told them of my new air in which a candle burned much better than in common air.
I wish you had taken me, Joseph.
I wish you had been there. It was difficult, Mary.
They didn't believe you?
Who knows? I knew the French common words, but not the scientific terms.
I would have translated for you.
I know. You're a clever woman, Mary. But who would take care of the children? No matter. Madame Lavoisier asked how I made the air.
And you told her?
Of course. Madame Lavoisier understood. She explained it to her husband.
I understand she assists him in the laboratory?
Indeed. After dinner, she displayed drawings of their chemical equipment.
I envy her.
So much better equipment than mine, which I hope will persuade Lord Shelburne to loosen his purse more, but her drawings were skillful.
I once learned how to draw.
You help in so many ways. You take care of house and family.
And money. But I worry about its source. You're dependent on his lordship's favors, which could be withdrawn without notice, Joseph. Have you heard what Edmund Burke says of you? The wild gas, the fixed air is plainly broke loose.
What? Well, at least he got one of my airs right.
I wish you'd be more cautious. Politics are dangerous for you. There are plenty in Birmingham would attack you for what you say on liberty and God.
Change will come. Men will be liberated from the variety of fetters which they have hitherto been held. Why be afraid? And of whom? Of these our slickers of kings?
I know what you preach, Joseph. But what about your work, your laboratory, our children? People stir against us.
Let them.
Isn't it ironic? Priestley, a chemical conservative, just think of his undying defense of phlogiston, was such a political and religious revolutionary that a mob burned his house in Birmingham. 3 years later, he fled to America with Benjamin Franklin's help.
While Lavoisier, the chemical revolutionary, was a political conservative.
Can we finally turn to Scheele's letter? Did Lavoisier get it? Did he read it?
There is no hint on Lavoisier's side, no letters, no hearsay, absolutely nothing to indicate that he had ever received a written communication from Scheele. Yet the answer is, yes, he did.
Yes to both questions.
To both.
And the evidence?
Grimaud's finding.
My goodness. Is that a leopard changing his spots?
Would you care to elaborate on that zoological bon mot?
Perhaps I should have used a chemical metaphor, quicksilver turning into gold, or in this instance, the reverse. After all, Grimaud was a French chemist turned historian. I thought none of you had use for such turncoats.
Since he found Scheele's letter in 1890, I was prepared to make an exception. Anyway, there was his letter, hidden among Lavoisier's papers for over 100 years.
And you saw it?
Yes, and I brought some slides to prove it. All right, listen to this. Je ne désire rien avec tant d'ardeur que de vous pouvoir faire montrer ma reconnaissance.
Stop showing off. Translate.
There is nothing I desire more eagerly than to be able to show you my discovery.
Well. So, we're moving to the Scheele camp.
Professor Yamerson, I hope you won't mind a minor correction.
What correction?
Reconnaissance means gratitude, not discovery. Scheele's just thanking Lavoisier for a book he had sent him earlier.
Of course. How stupid of me. Thank you, Ms. Zorn. Back to the letter. Here's the next slide. And note, Mademoiselle Zorn, here he actually describes the experiment.
And look at the date. September 30th, 1774, and Scheele's signature.
Professor, that doesn't prove that Lavoisier had actually read that letter.
Your Majesties, Dr. and Mrs. Priestley.
Apothecary Scheele, Fru Poole.
Welcome.
Knowing of your love for the stage and opera, your majesties,
In this, your magnificent court theater in Drottningholm,
in the tradition of the court of our King Louis XVI,
we present to you a small entertainment. A masque of
the victory of vital air.
over phlogiston. Vital fire of chemistry, the element that sets the others free. The Greek philosophers were unaware of how I act on water, earth, and air. Without me, phlogiston, the world would be quite unillumed, rudimentary. 'Tis in my gift the elements to bind, transforming them to everything we find.
Monsieur, you are most glittering and sure of what the world is made of. Tell me more. You say there's a terror this, a terror that. Pray, show me how these elements react.
A just inquiry, madame. First, take fire. All things that burn release me to the air. Take charcoal, fat, they're full of phlogiston. And when their blazing ceases, I am gone.
You have an end?
No! Listen carefully. Air can only hold just so much of me. There can be other ways I also may appear. When pure metal rusts, off I fly, my dear.
Your miracles are endless. Tell me more.
'Tis I that wins the metal from the ore. My role in such extractions will astound. Remember that in charcoal I am found, and from the coal the ores just suck me out.
A marvel, sir, yet you leave much to doubt. Your theory is hopelessly behind. We now know air to be of different kinds, inflammable, nitrous, vital, and fixed, and water's not an element, but mixed, as Montmarie will most ably demonstrate.
A revelation! I'll accommodate!
You boast that phlogiston's the key to fire and rust, but why not credit vital air? Could it not feed the flames or lead to rust? Combined with carbon, say, or iron it must. You claim that metal needs you, but what for? When charcoal coaxes oxygen from ore. Another point I feign cannot be true is your idea of rust. Surely you knew that metal grows in weight when thus decayed, yet you insist that nothing new is made.
Oh, my dear! Phlogiston might just be so light that it is weightless. Could he still be right?
Mon cher monsieur, you're speaking like an ass. You know there's no such thing. Negative mass. A revolution is about to dawn. In chemistry, as oxygen is born. Phlogiston is a notion of the past, disproved and set aside, indeed surpassed. In chemical reaction, this remains. Matter is neither lost nor gained. In this new chemistry, let us rejoice and thank our sovereign patrons in one voice, our Louis, George, and gallant King Gustav, in whose light we gather to finish off vain phlogiston. Now, join to celebrate how vital air triumphed in this debate.
They weren't amused. Perhaps we went too far.
We planted a seed. Their doubt will grow.
I worry.
Your Majesty's esteemed guests, throughout Europe, pneumatic chemistry is in the air. A dispute has arisen. Who among these great savants discovered the vital air supporting life? A golden medal with the likeness of our king, Gustavus III, will be struck in honor of the true discoverer. And our king is famed for his munificence in other ways.
As he squanders the people's money.
Let the judgment of Stockholm begin, and let the three savants be their own judges. Vital air. Who made it first?
I did, and called it Eldsluft, a good Swedish word for fire air.
But is that not air deprived of all phlogiston? The air that inflames all things. That is why I named it dephlogisticated air. But, dear Scheele, where should we have learned of your discovery?
In my book, about to appear, Your Majesty.
I made that air by heating Mercurius calcinatus in 1774 and communicated that discovery in the same year.
Mes amis, he who starts the hare does not always catch.
There is no hare to catch if someone does not start the hunt.
It is we who must decide who first captured the essence of that vital air.
And what does that mean?
It is essential to know who made the air first.
For it is the invention that will be remembered by posterity, and not its ephemeral interpretation.
Let us do the experiments we judge vital in this matter. Whose experiment will come first?
Monsieur Lavoisier, do me the honor of performing the experiment I brought to your attention some 3 years ago in my letter.
I know of no letter.
Huh. Let me read it for you. Dissolve silver in acid of nitre and precipitate it with alkali of tartar. Wash the precipitate, dry it, and reduce it by means of the burning lens in your apparatus.
But when I brought no burning lens.
Ah, my apologies. With the burning lens at hand, monsieur. When I first wrote, I thought of your celebrated giant lens, which was so far superior to what was available in my pharmacy. No matter. A mixture of two airs will be emitted and, pure silver left behind.
And then?
Apothecary Scheele once invited me out to his shed to show me an experiment he'd done earlier in Uppsala. He was bubbling the newly formed fire air through a kind of water.
It must have been lime water.
It turned cloudy, didn't it?
How did you know that?
I've listened to Joseph's lectures on fixed air.
The same air we expire. The one we remove by passage through lime water.
In the remaining air, he bid me thrust a splint that had burned out, just a glow of a coal at its end. It was toward evening.
And it flared in brightest flame and kept burning.
I did that experiment in 1771, 3 years before your experiment, Dr. Priestley, in a pharmacy in Uppsala, with equipment much more modest than now put at our disposal by your majesty.
Yet you did not report it?
I told Professor Bergman. I thought he would tell others. I had to earn my wages. I wanted to experiment. I had but little time to write of my observations.
Your experiments were with a silver salt.
I obtained the air over the next 3 years in many different ways, including red mercurius calcinatus, as you did.
That red mercury compound is also how we, Dr. Priestley and I, made that air.
We? We were not in the same laboratory, Monsieur Lavoisier. Pray speak clearly of who did what and when. More than once my experiments in pneumatic chemistry were cited by you.
Oh, is that a reason to complain?
Only to be then diluted, if not evaporated.
How did I do so?
You write, we did this, and we found that. Your royal we, sir, makes my contributions disappear, poof, into thin air. When I publish, I say I did. I found, I observed. I do not hide behind a we.
Enough of word plays. What now?
I made that air first, and did so alone, and I will now show you how I accomplished that. Mr. Scheele, will you perform the experiment?
It will be an honor to do so.
In August of 1774, I exposed mercurius calcinatus, the red crust that forms when mercury is heated in air, in my laboratory to the light of my burning lens. As the red solid is heated, an air will be emitted, while dark mercury globules will condense on the walls of the vessel. You will collect the air by bubbling it through water. As soon as the gas appears, be careful, Mr. Scheele, to catch it underwater.
But where is your balance, Dr. Priestley? Shall the gas not be weighed?
A timepiece is sufficient. We have here 2 chambers, one with ordinary air, the other with my new dephlogisticated one. Mr. Scheele, now take a mouse.
I asked him, why mice? And he said, mice live as we do. Would you use English children?
They live on a part of ordinary air.
And then he placed one mouse in a jar of plain air.
Where it died in time.
How do you know that?
Apothecary Scheele showed me.
It is a well-known fact, described also by other savants.
And then he placed the other one in...
Fire air!
My Joseph's dephlogisticated air.
And it lived much longer, did it not? This is why we call that new air eminently respirable, or vital air.
With living things, Carl Wilhelm can be clumsy. He often drops them. But we know mice in the country. If I didn't catch them, the cats did.
I detest mice.
There is no doubt Dr. Priestley's method produces vital air, but...
But, monsieur?
Now is my turn. May I proceed?
Of course.
We have just observed a mouse living longer in the vital air we all made. Yet in the end, that mouse also dies as the air is depleted. However, in my own work, I have moved far, far beyond watching mice die. Your Majesties, gentlemen, this air that I propose we henceforth call oxygen.
I object, sir. It is easy to call something by a new name when you do not know what you have. Be descriptive, sir. Why not dephlogisticated?
I know the air as well as you, monsieur. Oxy is Greek for acid. And since I believe our air to be associated with all acids, I am being descriptive.
Descriptive? Bah! You, sir, are being acid, but our dephlogisticated air is not.
Allow me the courtesy to continue. This air is at the heart of all chemistry. I have shown that when we breathe, the wondrous machinery of the body transforms a given weight of oxygen into other gases and water.
But that is obvious.
Not until you weigh it. For that, a timepiece is not sufficient, since nothing is gained nor lost in this world, be it in the economy of a country or a chemical reaction. The balance sheet of life's chemistry must be determined.
The banker is still counting his money.
I have brought from Paris a suit of rubber I have devised. It catches all the affluence of the body to show us the equation balances. Dr. Priestley, are you prepared to perform the experiment?
Indeed I am. Even weighing things on your balances.
My experiments are quite complex, technically. Perhaps Monsieur Scheele will help you.
It appears we require a volunteer for the experiment to wear your modern suit of armor. Mary?
I would help you, Joseph, but I fear for my life in that French contraption.
Don't be afraid, it's only science.
I will do it.
Madame.
Not only must you weigh my spouse, you must also weigh her suit. The measurements will take several hours.
Poor Madame.
Quantitative experiment is a hard mistress.
She sketched her husband's experiment.
But why? For her pleasure?
As a record, I suppose.
But why should a record be needed?
To give others evidence of what was done, of course.
And when it was done, I should think?
Do take care, for the margin of error must not be more than 18 grains and 125 pounds. What do you find?
Madame Lavoisier has lost some weight. But when we take into account the water and fixed air breathed out, there is indeed a rough balance.
Now we have verified each other's experiments. Now that we see that nothing is created.
Except by God.
Nor lost.
Except by man.
Or woman, especially when she is the subject of an experiment.
Gentlemen, that crucial mass balance punctures phlogiston's balloon.
Not in my view, sir. The experiment you so laboriously had us do with balances and the patient suffering of your wife did demonstrate, I must readily confess, one function of your eminently breathable air. But, monsieur, you did not show us how you made that air.
I knew my air was there in ordinary air. Did I not see metals combined with it, with sulfur or with phosphorus?
That does not tell us how you produce the dephlogisticated air.
Pray, stop calling it dephlogisticated, Dr. Priestley. That name derives from a theory that is passé.
Not for me!
Nor for me.
Why not a new name for the air to avoid this argument?
And call it oxygen, and yield to the tyranny of a nomenclature invented by you.
When a new structure is needed for a science, when indeed there must be a revolution, new names are also required.
But you did not know what that gas was.
I saw the need for one air explaining rusting, burning, and respiration.
But until that October dinner in Paris, when I informed you of my observations, you did not know the nature of that air.
And until that October day when you received my letter which told you how to make the fire.
No, I had begun my experiment with the freest
Only after you heard of what I said.
Order! Order, gentlemen! His Majesty is vexed. Royal displeasure is the only judgment you will receive today.
what did you say your PhD thesis was on?
You never asked.
I'm asking now.
Women in the lives of some 18th century chemists.
I hope you won't mind a
I
comment.
had a little choice before, so another won't hurt.
Right. So Astrid felt that she had to smuggle you in. Don't you feel used?
With you, I might have, but not with Professor Rosenquist.
Oh, Professor Rosenquist. Why don't you call her Astrid?
I do usually.
Why not now?
Out of respect for her. I didn't like the way you questioned her about my presence.
I was irritated. I am irritated. I don't enjoy surprises.
You made it very clear what you thought of history and historians.
How are we to know an historian was in the room?
You wouldn't have acted differently.
Probably not.
Actually, I have a feeling something has changed.
Yes?
Now, you all think you're experts in my field. When I see all of you sniping at each other, worrying about who published and who didn't, that wasn't my idea of science and scientists.
You think we arrange beetles in a museum case?
No, I thought at the heart of science was sheer curiosity. I see that in Scheele and maybe also in Priestley. I start having trouble with Lavoisier.
Oh, so Lavoisier is too meticulous for you. Is his interest in precise weights any different from yours in exact dates and documents?
I'm also talking about each
You're
of
confusing
you.
science with scientists.
Am I?
Science is a system. A search driven by curiosity, all the time touching what's real. That system works.
No matter what motivates the people who do it.
Scientists might be after priority, power, money. As long as they publish, Ula, someone will check their work.
And how often does that
The
happen?
more interesting the discovery, the more closely it will be checked.
To prove the other person wrong. Oh, what a noble reason.
It keeps us honest most of the time. It doesn't matter whether devils or angels uncover how the world works. It doesn't even matter if proper credit is given to others.
You're so cynical.
Maybe we all are, Ula. A little.
Maybe. Astrid. Maybe. But another part of me also knows that science isn't always about power, or control, or even progress. That the world is a playground, full of secrets, where it's just plain fun for me to find out why one molecule is bent, why another is linear.
In other words, scientists can also play?
Like historians.
Well, who knows about historians? Right, well, see you later. I have to get back to the lab.
Well, Ula, what do you think now, Bain?
As you said earlier, an interesting man.
I think I said complicated. I'll tell you a story about him. You know he was at the Pasteur Institute. He met a young French biologist there. She came back with him to Sweden.
That is interesting.
They lived together, but she couldn't take our November nights, so she went back to France. Since then, he's been in the lab all the time. But at night, he plays the cello.
So you like Bain?
I think you do too, don't you?
You will meet them both?
His Majesty insisted.
Antoine, that dinner in Paris with Priestley, I worry.
So do I. There were witnesses.
And the letter?
What letter?
Sheila's. I saw it.
You saw it?
It's complicated, but I couldn't tell you.
Then why do it now?
I feel guilty.
And I must share your guilt?
You are my husband.
Where is the letter?
Hidden.
You have not destroyed it.
You look so angry. Why?
I do not wish to discuss it.
You cannot tell your wife.
No, I can tell no one.
But why?
Once voiced, I'd have to deny that thought or condemn it.
So you disapprove of what I did?
You're still young.
Why blame you?
Subtlety only comes with maturity.
You taught me chemistry, now teach me subtlety.
Subtlety cannot be taught.
Nor explained.
If I'd known he'd choose a personal letter, not a scientific article to establish his priority, I would have wished that letter away.
Of course.
No, wait. But not wish to know how it disappeared.
If that is subtlety, I do not understand it.
Stray thought becomes iniquity when spoken.
Oh, it's the lawyer in you, a role I never liked.
The law is never likable, especially when dealing with guilt.
I'm the guilty one. I admitted it, and only to you.
Tainted by knowledge of the deed. How can I approve of my wife's action?
Even when done as a token of love for you.
Especially when done for love. For then I must reject your love as well.
Why face him?
It's complicated, but I must.
To prove you told him?
To show I was first.
And Scheele?
I trust him.
He claims priority.
He did not publish.
Yet wasn't he first?
Perhaps.
But that would make you second.
It would make Lavoisier third.
Is that the point, that he was last?
Indeed.
Why?
Have the world bow to him when I preceded him?
If you were King Gustav.
Oh, God forbid.
Still, if you were king, whom would you pick?
I'd ask, whom would the world choose?
Joseph, answer me as my husband, not as a clever minister.
You've always wanted black and white answers.
This question deserves it.
Deserving something does not always lead to getting
You're
it.
not in a pulpit!
I published first, which makes me first in the world's eyes.
I meant the heart, not the eyes.
The world has no heart.
But you do. You've often opened it to me.
You're a clever woman, Mary.
No. This is your loving wife asking.
Before we came to Stockholm, I was convinced in my heart and mind that I was first. But now
I understand, Joseph.
We will all go home with empty hands, Sora Margareta. We quarreled.
Men!
The king dismissed us. He couldn't offend the French and British. They are strong at court.
And Bergman?
He should have reminded Lavoisier of my letter. In public.
So much for friendship. But I think the king was foolish.
Shush! You must not say that.
Others do it even at court. But to please you, I shall call him unwise.
In what
To
way?
think that three natural philosophers could agree.
It happens. Sometimes.
When it's a question of who's first.
We've missed our chance.
So, it will remain a mystery?
No. The world likes it simple.
Carl Wilhelm, who will speak for you?
The facts.
But when?
Like the skirt, Astrid.
Thought you might.
Still a damn good-looking woman.
That's exactly what you said the first time we met.
Chemistry was right. Then,
We were on fire, banked. Then.
and released something.
Like Priestley's and Scheele's phlogiston.
Yeah, more or less. But,
Dangerous word for lovers.
Astrid, ex-lovers.
We were wrong. All intent on release.
As Priestley and Scheele
When
were.
lovers burn, something is also gained.
So Lavoisier said, but what did we acquire?
I'd say it was knowledge.
Ooh, how biblical.
I meant of each other. No snake led us astray, but an ambitious man always has problems.
With an ambitious woman.
What else is new? We were clever. So clever. We even wanted to do something for the benefit of mankind.
We wanted the world to know it.
Somehow I thought the retro Nobel for the dead would be purer.
You were wrong.
At least the retro Nobel got us into the same room.
As chairperson, you could have asked for someone else.
You could have refused. Why didn't you?
Guess for the same reason you didn't pick a substitute.
And why are you so prickly during our meetings?
Oh, and why are you so bossy?
We should learn to compromise.
Something neither one of us was very good at.
It was a pretty good paper you published the other day.
Pretty good?
All right, damn good.
Why the compliment?
Wasn't meant as a compliment, it's a factual observation.
You mean that? Why tell me now?
Ashford was right. Bury the hatchet. Oh, if you're carrying a grudge too far. Hey, You've always blamed me for holding up your paper. I was only doing my job.
You did nothing but nitpick. That I discovered a great new catalyst for reaction no one could make go before. That wasn't good enough for you.
I wanted to see you do better.
No, decent.
I wanted you to understand how it worked on the atomic level.
And while I was trying to figure that out, you let your pals at Stanford scoop us.
I knew nothing about the Stanford work. Ulf, I didn't talk to them. You can't go on blaming me. But maybe.
Yes.
Just didn't realize how important the catalyst was.
I might as well confess something.
Confession isn't necessary.
I told Bengt about it.
And?
He took your side. He thought you looked too honest.
So what did you say to that?
That all scientists wear masks.
In that case, for a change, how about we take ours off?
That's asking for too much too soon.
Okay. How about shaking hands?
I didn't think I'd live to see the day.
He came to his senses.
And he, for a change, likes some work I did.
You two really made up. I don't need to know why. Just do me a favor, both of you. Agree on one candidate.
You weren't trying to maneuver the committee by any chance, are you?
Me, an innocent theoretical chemist.
You're pushing for a consensus.
We've got to come up with a consensus for the Academy, or at least a majority.
Consensus would be preferable.
Otherwise, all we get forward is a recommendation that the first to discover oxygen should be honored.
Yes, but we still haven't agreed what being first means. Is it the initial discovery, the first publication, or full understanding?
Very insightful question. Now let's see, where exactly was it that Columbus thought he was sailing?
Who cares? Our Vikings got there first.
Yes, and they found people who had already come thousands of years earlier.
My dear wife, in the solitude of a cell, I do not just reflect on my sudden fall from grace, but on our life together.
My dear husband, like my father, you recognized a young girl's talent. You did not snuff it out. You were not bored when I played the harpsichord for you in my father's house.
You were not bored when I spoke to you of chemistry, of geology, of astronomy.
Remember when we played the game of good fortune? I wondered where the arrow would stop. At which word? Wisdom. Convent. Marriage.
When we played the game of good fortune, I hid from you a magnet's power, whereby I moved the arrow to love. A word I had not used before. And then I married you.
And I became your trusted partner. But love I never heard you say again.
I had no time for idle pastimes. even for children. I thought you understood.
Science and public service were your métier. Still,
I always felt you were satisfied. Yet for you, there were other men.
love is what I miss.
I offered you more. True partnership. No other man could do the same.
Pierre Dupont offered love. For 17 years. No matter, I did not dare explain to you what I had done. Now, before it is too late, I must write of it.
In prison, I now understand what I had neglected in my careful weighing. Ambition without love is cold.
I've never loved another man.
You know, there's a simple solution to our problem. Give this first retro Nobel Prize in chemistry jointly to all three and cite them for the chemical revolution rather than the discovery of oxygen.
Cop out.
Including Lavoisier, who failed to credit work explicitly reported to him by Priestley and confided to him in a letter from Scheele.
Which Lavoisier had never seen.
Did you say, Miss Orne?
How can you be so sure?
I was intrigued, so I made a quick flight to America. To the library at Cornell University.
You wasted your time. I know all about the Cornell collection of Lavoisier papers. It would have also saved you some money.
The money came from one of my research grants.
You were always loose with your money. So, what did you find there?
A book.
A book in a library. What a surprise.
The book was called Histoire de Théâtre.
How is a book going to help us? A book about theater at that.
Well, I would like to show you some slides. The object that I found there only looks like a book. It's Madame Lavoisier's Nécessaire, a travel chest disguised as a book. To my knowledge, historians had not mentioned it before, but then I saw it in the catalog of the 1956 Souvenirs de Lavoisier sale held in Paris. And then I found out that the Cornell Library had purchased it in 1963. So I decided to take a look.
Intuition?
Why not call it hands-on research by an historian? Here it is opened. Look at all the compartments with thread, needles, combs, pens, even bottles for perfumes and ink. Even a ruler crammed into a slit like a Swiss Army knife.
I'll be damned.
When you lift the tray out, there's a space for stationery. I checked the watermarks and the papers actually after Madame Lavoisier's time, so her heirs must have used the Nécessaire. But the broken mirror in the lid intrigued me. There's a space behind the mirror. I poked gently around it and found a paper. This one.
What is it?
A letter. This is a photocopy, of course. A letter apparently never sent from Madame Lavoisier to her husband.
What does it say?
She writes,
My dear husband, in these difficult times, in the separation forced upon us by the revolution, I reflect on the past. I return time and time again to Apothecary Scheele's 1774 letter.
Apparently she intercepted Scheele's famous letter. Remember, she handled most of Lavoisier's correspondence.
Now that the brilliance and accuracy of your studies have convinced the world of the central role of oxygen in chemistry, now that phlogiston lies in the graveyard of discarded theories, I will not speak of the diehards, such as Dr. Priestley, who continue to preach it. I ask you now to forgive me. I could not show Apothecary Scheele's letter to you, my dear husband. It would have taken the wind out of your sails. You, who were so close. Our priority rested on my hiding it. Forgive me, but I could not destroy it.
Note, she didn't say your priority, but our. She filed the letter without showing it to him, or actually hid it, which may be one of the reasons why it surfaced only over 100 years later when Grimaud found it.
And you waited until now to tell us.
She told me.
And why not me? Or the rest of us?
I thought Ula was entitled to announce her discovery
Excuse
herself.
me.
If you want someone to blame,
The question
blame
was
me.
not addressed to you. Why? To show how clever you are? I would have told you that if you had the courtesy to inform me first. Lavoisier is my man!
I'm here to help!
Why was her letter in that necessaire, and why was it never sent?
I asked myself the same question.
And?
I haven't told you yet the date of Madame Lavoisier's letter. It was just before Christmas, 1793, when Lavoisier was in jail. A few months before his execution.
19 years after Scheele's letter came.
During the worst of times with her husband in prison, she wrote to him, returning to what she had done years earlier. But when she did, it was no longer safe to send that letter.
One letter she could not send. Another she could not burn. I owe you an apology about Madame Lavoisier's letter. I was boorish.
I would have used another word, but thanks.
May I pay you a compliment?
Do you think I'll be able to handle it?
I wish I'd had found that travels chest.
That is a compliment.
Ula, may I invite
Wait.
you...
First things first. Would you join us, please?
First in the chair's eyes are mine.
I want to finish the business today, gentlemen, so it's time for a formal motion. Bank, do you want to start?
I propose that the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences select Antoine Lavoisier, the architect of the chemical revolution, for the first retro Nobel Prize in chemistry. Thank you. I hope that was formal enough.
Mine is less formal but direct. I propose Carl Wilhelm Scheele for first discovering oxygen. A humble man, too, who did not indulge in hype or self-promotion, despite holding the record for discovering at least 5 elements, including chlorine and manganese.
If Suna wants to bring in other inventions, what about my Priestley's discovery of laughing gas, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen, or carbonated beverages and pencil erasers? Alfred Nobel would have been pleased by Priestley's sense for the practical.
Your nomination, please.
What's a few months between friendly competitors? Clearly, we have a case of simultaneous discovery. I propose Scheele and Priestley. Full stop. Lavoisier, he may deserve it, but not for the discovery of oxygen.
I nominated him as the father of the chemical revolution, which has happened to have come from oxygen. Lavoisier's failings are clear, yes, but at least he brought about true change.
Nor moral lapse.
It's happened more than once with our regular Nobel Prize winners. Only innate delicacy prevents me from naming some examples.
Delicacy, Bate, is not something I would have listed among your many virtues.
Well, in that case, let me be blunt. Good or poor ethics simply cannot be weighed on the same scale as good or poor science.
But what a precedent for the first retro Nobel.
Please, we've had it with the arguments for and against. It's time to make a decision. There are 7 combinations of the 3 names one might imagine. The 3 men alone, 3 pairs, and all 3 together. I admit I'm relieved that Lavoisier never saw Scheele's letter.
But does it change the facts? We all know Lavoisier was not the first to discover oxygen.
But you still have to understand what you discover. Do you realize that as late as 1800, your man Priestley still wrote a book entitled The Doctrine of Phlogiston Established and the Composition of Water Refuted? In other words, down with H2O and onwards with mumbo-jumbo.
You're too hard on my experimentalists.
The world needs physical chemists like Lavoisier, or better yet, theoreticians.
Like you.
They could have done worse. But we all know the role women played in chemistry at that time. Madame Lavoisier got about as close as was realistic. Now, decisions. There are 4 committee members and 4 proposals. Lavoisier alone, Scheele alone, Priestley plus Scheele, and finally all 3 together. I presume each of you would still vote for his original recommendation. Even if I change my vote and pick one of your choices, that would get us very far. Here's a way to resolve our problem. We each vote for a pair of candidates.
3 options only: Lavoisier, Scheele, Lavoisier, Priestley, and Priestley, Scheele.
Brilliant. But why waste time going through your exercise of voting for pairs?
Simple. It forces everyone to think about another candidate while still holding on to their favorite.
And what if we don't have second choices?
You more than anyone else in this room should know in life we mostly end up with second choices.
You more than anyone else in this room should know that I can't be forced into a decision.
You'll never stop me from trying to persuade
that's
you,
right.
all of you, to arrive at a consensus. Do I have your agreement? Banked. We both know what Lavoisier did.
So?
Do we really dilute Lavoisier's credit by adding one other man? Earlier on, you said neither one of us was good at compromise. How about demonstrating you were wrong?
Did you hear that?
Sure did.
Out of the question. If Lavoisier gets the nod, then only Scheele or Priestley can share it.
I could live with that if Sheila's the other.
But what if he's not? What if I vote for Lavoisier, Priestley, and so do they?
Extreme.
Before or after the vote was counted. A lot of good that would do you.
So what's your proposal?
Let's both vote for your man and my Priestley.
I'll have to think about it.
Better do it fast.
Ula, would you distribute the ballots, please? Please, Banked. Please. 2 names. Do Madame Lavoisier that favor.
So what's the vote?
Come on, Astrid, tell us. This isn't Florida.
Well, it could have been worse.
Nothing is created, nothing is lost, yet nothing is simple. Surely not a world that guillotined my father and my husband in one day. Not even the burning of a candle or the breathing of a mouse. My husband understood that, and posterity will recognize him for it. Of course, some will ask, what good is such recognition? Oh, much good will come from our oxygen. Kings will surely tax it. But after death, other savants will carry on where the gauche apothecary and the priestly chemist and my husband stopped. Imagine what it means to understand what gives a leaf its color and how it turns red. What makes a fever fall, a flame burn. Imagine.